This is not the Republican Party that I grew up in, and I don't think it's ever coming back. I think it's gone. I think it's gone for good. They're in the ditch, and they just don't know it yet.
How are we in the
Hope
ditch?
springs
We won the
eternal
national popular vote last November. We won a crushing victory in the Electoral College. We won majorities in the House and the Senate. We just passed the big, beautiful bill. Peace is breaking out in the Middle East. Peace is breaking out on the African continent. Gas prices are lower than they've been in 4 years. Taxes are going to be low. Egg prices are down 69%. The southern border is secure. Geoff, these are things Republicans have believed in for a very long time.
But Scott, I mean, we can't forget that it wasn't that long ago when you were probably closer to the Mike Pence view of this, that you were not necessarily a Trump supporter until fairly recently.
I voted for him 3 times.
In this segment, Abby Phillip and former Georgia Governor Geoff Duncan confront Scott Jennings during a tense exchange on NewsNight. What unfolds isn't simply an argument over Donald Trump as a political figure, but a broader reckoning with what the Republican Party has turned into under his dominance. Long-standing conservative ideas are pushed aside, replaced by grievance politics, loyalty signaling, and non-stop culture warfare. As the discussion escalates, Phillip and Duncan methodically expose the contradictions in Jennings's defense, forcing a deeper conversation about whether the GOP is still recognizable as a governing party at all.
Geoff, you may be the perfect person to answer this question. Is Mike Pence right that that's a minority view, that Trump is sort of leading this sort of limited faction of the Republican Party right now?
With all due respect, Mike Pence is not correct when he makes that statement. Donald Trump completely controls the entire GOP. And the only example I can give that equates to it is like a rogue cult leader coming into a church and taking it over. He's brainwashed him. And you don't have to look any further than the zombie-esque reaction to even the last few weeks. I mean, Doge has imploded. He's made promises, yet the base doesn't hold him accountable for it. We've spent trillions of dollars in debt that he promised that we wouldn't. We still have wars in Ukraine raging, and he's taken the sides of Vladimir Putin until the last few hours. This is not the Republican Party that I grew up in. And I don't think it's ever coming back. I think it's gone. I think it's gone for good. They're in the ditch, and they just don't know it yet.
How are we in the
Hope
ditch?
springs
We
eternal
won the national popular vote last November. We won a crushing victory in the Electoral College. We won majorities in the House and the Senate. We just passed the big, beautiful bill. Peace is breaking out in the Middle East. Peace is breaking out on the African continent. Gas prices are lower than they've been in 4 years. Taxes are going to be low. Egg prices are down 69%. The southern border is secure. Geoff, these are things Republicans have believed in for a very long time.
But Scott, I mean, we can't forget that it wasn't that long ago when you were probably closer to the Mike Pence view of this, that you were not necessarily a Trump supporter until fairly recently.
I voted for him 3 times.
I'm making news here at this table because what I'm pointing to is that your evolution is mirroring something that's happened in the Republican Party in general. January 2024, 40% of GOP leading voters ID'd as MAGA supporters. March 2025, that number is now 71%. So I'm actually not so sure that anything about Trump has changed in the interim. It's really more that people like you have gone from being more aligned with a Mike Pence to being more aligned with Donald Trump. Explain that to us.
It's a good and valid question, but I don't see much disalignment. They have a personality conflict. Pence and Trump obviously had a falling out over a very serious issue, but on conservative orthodox policy stuff, the only real area where Trump has truly changed the party is on tariffs and trade. He believes in tariffs a lot more than any other president has since the early 1900s. And so that is a major difference in the platform. I acknowledge that. But on taxes, on the border, on pro-life, on having a strong military, and even now getting NATO strengthened with the 5%, helping Israel defeat Iran, he's not an isolationist. He is on many ways the same as every other Republican president of my lifetime and of your lifetime. There are some differences, but it's not as vast, I think, as you want it to be.
Donald Trump does not remind me of Ronald Reagan. And the Scott Jennings, who was a Republican growing up, working for Mitch McConnell, George Bush, and others, very respectable Republicans, would probably not even shake hands with the Scott Jennings that's sitting here.
When you actually look at the numbers, it becomes impossible to argue that Trump merely energized a faction of Republicans. What's happened is a wholesale identity shift. Polling over the last few years shows that a dominant share of Republican voters now see themselves primarily through a MAGA lens rather than as traditional conservatives. That distinction matters because it signals that loyalty to Trump has overtaken ideology itself. The party didn't just change positions. It changed what it stands for and who it answers to. That shift is even clearer when you examine fiscal policy. For decades, Republicans campaigned on balanced budgets and debt reduction, presenting themselves as the adults in the room on government spending. Yet under Trump, the national debt surged by trillions of dollars, placing his administration among the largest contributors to deficit growth in U.S. history. That outcome wasn't treated as a failure by the base. It was brushed aside, excused, or ignored entirely, something that would have been politically unacceptable in earlier eras of GOP leadership. Foreign policy tells the same story. Scott Jennings insists Trump strengthen NATO, but that claim collapses when you remember Trump repeatedly threatened to withdraw from the alliance altogether, a move widely described by analysts as a strategic gift to Russia. Previous Republican figures emphasized U.S. leadership through alliances and shared defense. Trump, by contrast, openly praised authoritarian leaders like Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong-un, conduct that would have ended a Republican career before 2016. Seen in that light, Geoff Duncan's comparison isn't exaggeration. It explains why ideas Republicans once rejected, exploding deficits, trade wars with allies, and disregard for democratic institutions, are now celebrated as long as they come from Trump. This isn't a continuation of conservatism. It's something else entirely.
I shook hands with Mitch McConnell this week, so A. B, Mitch McConnell and Donald Trump worked together to change the Supreme Court and give us a 6-3 majority to pass the tax cuts in 2017. Again, personal differences are
Donald
different
Trump
than policy
showed
alignment.
respect to your former boss, Mitch McConnell? Do
I
you think
he
he's
has shown
respected
respect to him?
Yeah.
Not always, no.
If we asked you to find one day since his inauguration that he has not lied to you and your family, do you think you could do it? One day he's spoken publicly? Because he can't stop lying, Scott. And I do think the party's changed quite a bit. The Republican Party I grew up with would not delight in beating cops for a lie and then pardoning the people who beat the cops. I don't know what conservatism means anymore. This gentleman is the perfect person to speak to what Mike Pence is going through, because what does it mean? It doesn't mean family values, doesn't mean the Christian values, fiscal responsibility.
Again, we don't live in a
deficit
theocracy.
spending?
We live in a nation of laws, and we live in a nation of
the
policy
Republican
choices.
Party, the Republican
Our
Party's
policy
ideology.
choices today are basically the same as Republican policy choices, with the exception of tariffs, which I acknowledge. But this president, has done a lot of conservative stuff that people have always wanted.
You've said two things a few times on the show. One about not living in a theocracy, which you're right. But it is also true, and I think this is John's point, that for many, many decades, the Republican Party, and even under Trump, says explicitly, we are a Judeo-Christian society. He claims to his supporters that his faith is important, that it's the most important thing in American society. He says that.
Yeah.
The Bible should be taught in schools, that he is selling a Bible with his name on it. So there's that.
It's
but
true.
then secondly, the party of George W. Bush, of compassionate conservatism, of immigration reform, that party is also gone too.
Well,
right?
that party understood soft power in USAID.
USAID, PEPFAR, that party is also gone, is it not?
What stands out most in this exchange is Scott Jennings' repeated attempt to downplay Trump as merely a standard conservative leader with a rough edge. That framing collapses the moment you zoom out. The Republican Party under Trump isn't centered on a consistent governing philosophy. It's organized around whatever benefits Trump personally at a given moment. Tax policy and judicial appointments are used as cover, but the deeper shift is the erosion of core Republican norms in favor of impulse, grievance, and loyalty. Take the issue of values. For decades, Republicans sold themselves as the party of moral leadership, often linking policy to ethical responsibility. The Bush-era idea of compassionate conservatism produced initiatives like PEPFAR, a global health program credited with saving millions of lives. Under Trump, that moral framework was replaced with spectacle and branding. He publicly boasted about misconduct, faced repeated allegations of infidelity, and even turned religious symbolism into merchandise. That isn't values-based leadership. It's commercialization of faith for political gain. The same pattern shows up on fiscal policy. Past Republican leaders warned relentlessly about deficits and government debt. Trump abandoned that entirely. Federal debt expanded by trillions of dollars during his term, even before COVID-related spending, marking one of the largest increases under any president. Had a Democrat overseen that level of deficit growth, conservative media would have labeled it economic extremism. Under Trump, it was waved away. And on foreign policy, the break from Republican tradition is just as stark. The GOP once defined itself by alliance building and American leadership abroad. Trump repeatedly questioned NATO's value, threatened withdrawal, praised authoritarian rulers, and treated long-standing allies with open hostility. That's not a continuation of conservative foreign policy. It's erratic isolationism rebranded as strength.
I come at this from a completely different position. I actually see a more welcoming Republican Party as somebody who comes traditionally from the left. And I say this with regard to four things that I outlined personally. So I perceive the Republican Party as being interventionist with foreign policy and now being more America first, although I did support what we did in Iran, but we're not engaged in a forever war as far as I can tell. And we were with Cheney and Bush. We have been previously. His position on abortion, while I am more to the left on this, it used to be fully pro-life. He's suggesting it goes to the states, and I believe he said he would never support a federal abortion ban. He said he wouldn't block gay marriage, which is something that I thought was always traditionally a conservative position. And the tariffs thing, as you mentioned, as far as I can remember, conservatives were globalists. They were for free trade, and it arguably hollowed out the middle class. So I'm with Trump on that.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that this divide right here, I mean, you're demonstrating a lot of reasons why Trump was able to actually make inroads in Democratic constituencies, but you're suggesting that he's the same old Republican as everybody else.
No.
But I think that Jillian is perhaps proof that that's not the case.
His attitude and his ability to get things done, his spirit, the way he fights the left, the way he fights for free speech and Western civilization, and the way he's open to coalition building and building non-traditional alliances is a key political talent.
I think that explains your support for Trump, but I think that that Jillian is correct that on those policy issues, Trump has tried to be somewhere in, dare I say, a bit of the mushy middle on some of this stuff. He ran as an anti-war candidate. What he ran on versus how he actually governs, it shifts. But what he ran on, what he pulled people in on, I think is the difference here.
But I think we
between
also
the two of you.
Can't ignore not only Geoff and the divides here at the table, but the millions of people, thousands of people who consider themselves anti-Trump, who were once Republicans, and a whole movement of Republicans who, I can remember sitting at a meeting leading up to this election. I've got Bill Kristol sitting here. I've got, former friends, conservatives from across the aisle. We were all aligned in how do we defeat Trump. It was a meeting.
How'd it work out?
You know what, Scott?
Just asking.
All right.
Well, I'll tell you what.
Guys,
He's underwater on every single issue. Hold on. Why don't you let me finish?
Guys, we gotta go.
My only point is, I think you can't ignore the fact that there are thousands of people who consider themselves traditional Republicans, like Geoff, who no longer see a home in the Republican.
Start with abortion, because this is where the record matters more than the rhetoric. Trump now claims the issue should be left to the states, but that position only exists because of actions he proudly took while in office. He openly celebrated appointing Supreme Court justices selected specifically to overturn Roe v. Wade, and that outcome reshaped the legal landscape overnight. The result has been a wave of state-level bans, including laws as early as 6 weeks, some with no exceptions for rape or incest, and severe penalties for medical providers. That reality didn't emerge under prior Republican presidents. It followed directly from Trump's judicial strategy. Foreign policy tells a similar story. Scott Jennings presents Trump as an anti-war figure, but the governing record doesn't match the branding. During Trump's presidency, drone strikes increased, troop withdrawals were announced and reversed, and U.S. involvement in Syria continued under a different justification. In his final year, his administration approved tens of billions of dollars in arms sales to the United Arab Emirates. That isn't disengagement from global conflict. It's a reconfiguration of it, with profit and posturing replacing coherent strategy. Trade policy is another example where the slogan outpaced the substance. Tariffs were marketed as populist protection, but economists warned they would function as a tax on American consumers. Nonpartisan analysis later estimated that households absorbed significant annual costs as a result. Farmers, particularly in the Midwest, were hit so hard by retaliatory trade measures that the federal government had to step in with massive subsidy programs funded by taxpayers, essentially compensating for damage caused by the policy itself. And politically, the fallout has been just as telling. Trump has struggled with independent and suburban voters, while a growing list of longtime Republicans, including figures like Geoff Duncan, Adam Kinzinger, and Liz Cheney, have publicly stated that the party no longer reflects their values. That fracture didn't happen by accident. It reflects a party transformed from one organized around governing principles into one centered on personal loyalty. Abby Phillip's assessment cuts to the core. Trump didn't update the Republican Party for a new era. He hollowed it out and rebuilt it around himself. That's why conservatives who value institutions, accountability, and governance are walking away. Before we continue, it's worth asking how anyone is supposed to make sense of politics when every outlet seems to tell a different version of the same story. That's where tools like Ground News come in. It allows you to compare how stories are covered across the political spectrum, helping you spot bias and missing context. If you want a clearer picture of the media landscape, there's a link in the description with a discounted option to explore deeper coverage insights.